In 1879, Charlie Parkhurst lay dying in his little cabin in Watsonville. His neighbors knew very little about him. If you'd ask, they'd probably say, "Parkhurst? Strange old fella. I understand he's pretty sick." Two old friends, Otto Stosser and George Harmon, would stop in from time to time, not often, because they were living up in Soquel. But whenever they could, they'd drop in on old Charlie to see how he was getting along. They could tell Charlie wasn't getting any better. And one day they said, "Charlie, I think you'd better let us call the doctor. He might be able to help you." Charlie frowned. "No, ain't no damn doctor gonna poke around in me. Dying's a one-way ticket for a ride you take alone. Any damn doctor canosing around here, I'll blow his head off." He died December 28th. And on January 1st, 1880, the San Francisco Call newspaper printed a long obituary. That's how his neighbors learned the incredible role Charlie had played in California history. Charlie's obituary said he'd been born in 1812 in New Hampshire, then moved to Rhode Island, where he'd worked as a stable boy and a coachman, and then to Georgia, where he'd become a stagecoach driver. When his boss, Andrew Birch, decided to come to California to start the California Stage Company, he brought Charlie along. "I aim to be the best damn driver in California," Charlie told folks. Charlie's first stagecoach route was fairly easy, between San Jose and Oakland. The ground was level and the roads were good. But then gold was discovered. Experienced drivers were needed in the mountainous Mother Lode country. Charlie was transferred, and now he needed a team of 6 horses to drive the stage on mountain roads between Stockton and Mariposa, and between Sacramento and Placerville. Going down the steep hills called for tremendous strength at the brakes, tremendous judgment in matching the speed to the terrain, and tremendous skill in keeping the lead team just the right distance ahead of the swing team. Good drivers were scarce. Charlie became known as one of the best. Stagecoach drivers were supposed to keep a strict schedule. It was considered a disgrace if you brought your coach into a station more than a half hour late. Every 10 to 12 miles, there were swing stations where, while hostlers changed the horses, passengers could get refreshments and walk around. The stagecoach drivers all knew each other. They'd meet at the stations that marked division points along the routes. They met in Sacramento and Sonora, Merced, Hangtown, Jackson. They usually sat together in the saloons, and folks called them Knights of the Whip. Charlie was easy to recognize. He was short, just a little over 5 feet, strong and stocky. His face has been described as being brown, leathery, and tough. But whether this was due to a racial mixture or prolonged exposure to the weather, no one knows. Folks talked about Charlie's style. His gloves, for example, were made of the finest buckskin that the Indians could fashion. Stagecoach drivers had to keep their hands free, so of course they couldn't smoke a pipe. Cigarettes were disdained. Why, only a dude or freight wagon driver would use those sissy trifles. But a good cigar, that was the thing. And Charlie greatly appreciated it when passengers tipped him with a cigar. There's a story that went around about another stagecoach driver teasing Charlie about a cargo of special passengers traveling from one camp to another entertaining the miners, a small troupe of women who sang and danced for the saloon customers. The man cornered Charlie in the saloon. "That's one covey of quail you sure ought to see, Charlie. Why, you ought to hook up with one of those hurdy-gurdy girls. Might make a good wife, if you could break her into a one-team harness. What do you say, Charlie?" Charlie didn't say anything, and so he called out to the other drivers, "Well, fellas, I reckon old Charlie here don't know much about women." Charlie took a long, slow puff on his cigar. Then he answered, "You might be surprised if you knew what I know about women. I'll say this for you. You got a hell of a lot of guts. More guts than brains, I'd say. Anyhow, set 'em up. I'll buy the next round." Another story was about a time Charlie had been warned not to make a run because of the weather. That winter, because the snowpack had been unusually heavy, and now due to the spring runoff from the melting snow, rivers were overflowing. The Tuolumne River, which Charlie had to cross at Oak Flat, had already swollen over its banks and was roaring down, bringing trees and other debris. As they started the descent to the river, Charlie and his passenger could see the raging floodwaters. Suddenly, about 50 yards from the bridge, a man appeared in the middle of the road, waving his arms. "Don't try to cross the bridge! She's about to go any minute!" "Don't go," pleaded the passenger. "Don't take the chance." Charlie hesitated. The struggle was between common sense and the teasing he'd get if he didn't meet his deadline. Then with a yell, Charlie took a double hitch on the reins and cracked his whip. Nostrils wide, ears back, the 6 horses hit the boards of the swaying bridge almost as one, and the coach hurtled across, coming safely to a stop on the other side. Just at that moment, the bridge tore loose from its moorings. There was a squeaking cry. The bridge fell apart and was swept away. Charlie and the passenger watched it go. "Good Lord," the passenger gasped. "I thought we were goners for sure. Another second, and we'd have been down there in that water, you and me both." "Aw, shucks," snorted Charlie. "I never let that happen. Why, I'm pretty damn particular who I take a bath with." The stagecoach arrived on time, and the story was repeated up and down the line. At one point in his career, some said it happened near Redwood City, Parkhurst met with the kind of accident all drivers dread. Kicked in the face while trying to shoe a horse, he lost the sight in his left eye. For the rest of his life, Charlie wore an eye patch, and folks called him One-Eyed Charlie, but never to his face. Calamities of nature were not the only hazards of the road. The drivers also had to contend with highwaymen. This was before the time of the notorious Black Bart. But even in the early days of stagecoach travel, especially in the Mother Lode country, there were highwaymen. Some worked the same locality long enough to become known. One such character was an enterprising entrepreneur of the road who came to be called Sugarfoot. Not much is known about him, but in the folklore of the region, it said that on 2 occasions he and Charlie Parkhurst came face to face in their respective occupations. The first time, Charlie was on the Mariposa to Stockton run. He was carrying a large sum of gold in the strong box under the driver's seat. It was a hot summer day. Charlie's mind was probably on the cold beer waiting for him in the next town. Suddenly, 2 bandits, their faces covered, stepped out from behind a rock. One grabbed the lead horses. The other leveled a double-barreled shotgun right at Charlie. "Now, don't try to be a hero, Charlie. All we want is the box, so toss her down, and no foolishness about it." "Foolishness be damned! I was asleep or you wouldn't have got this far. I take it you're Sugarfoot, you low-down." "You might be right. You tell him old Sugarfoot got the last laugh." "This'll be the last time. If you try this on me again, I'll put daylight through that yellow liver of yours." Well, the outlaws got the money, and Charlie smarted from the embarrassment of it. The next day, he put a loaded pistol under his seat, and after that, he never made a run without it. A few months later, on the same run, almost at the same place, 2 masked gunmen appeared. The express box was carrying more gold than usual. "Throw down the box, Charlie." Charlie reached down, but in the same movement, he jerked the reins. The lead team reared, and the other horses jostled. Distracted, both bandits looked at the horses. Charlie grabbed his gun. 2 quick shots cracked out. One of the outlaws dropped his shotgun, grabbing his stomach. The other jumped on a horse and galloped off up the rocky hillside. The wounded man was found a few days later in an abandoned miner's cabin. It was Sugarfoot. In 1867, Charlie retired. Rheumatism had made driving difficult, and with his savings, he bought a small ranch near Soquel, where he had a few cattle, raised wheat and hay, and put in an apple orchard. He registered to vote. Charlie Darky Parkhurst, age 55, occupation, farmer, and he voted in the 1868 national election. However, the increasing pain of rheumatism and a rapidly developing cancer of the tongue, probably from all those cigars, eventually made it difficult to farm. Charlie sold his ranch and settled into the small cabin near Watsonville. Now, even from this little story, you can tell that Charlie Parkhurst had a colorful life. He killed an outlaw and had his moment of fame. Known far and wide as one of the best whips of the gold rush, he'd earned the respect of his peers. He'd rolled dice, chewed tobacco, smoked cigars, gambled. He'd always been fiercely independent, even refusing medical aid in the last days of his life. Despite his renown, Charlie was always a loner. He died alone, and his secret followed him almost to the grave. But one day, when George Harmon and Otto Stosser came for a visit, they found Parkhurst had died, and the coroner was called. That's when Charlie's secret was revealed. Charlie Parkhurst was a woman. Research revealed Charlie'd been born Charlotte Parkhurst, and because Charlotte Parkhurst voted in the 1868 election, she was the first woman in the United States to vote in a national election. Parkhurst lies buried in the Stosser plot of the Watsonville Pioneer Cemetery. The Pajaro Valley Historical Society erected a monument which says, Charlie Darky Parkhurst, 1812 to 1879, noted whip of the gold rush days. Drove stage over Mount Madonna in early days of Valley. Last run, San Juan to Santa Cruz. Death in cabin near 7 Mile House revealed one-eyed Charlie, a woman. The first woman to vote in the United States, November 3rd, 1868.